In this video, we'll cover 3 more tools in Alteryx. We're going to cover the formula tool right here, the sample tool, and the random sample or random percent sample tool. These 3 tools come from the preparation group of tools, and I've made them favorites, as you can see. So you're looking at our workflow that we left off with in the last video, and we can run this. What I've done is I've taken the results palette that's usually down here, and I've just put it up here to make it easier to see things. So if you recall, here was our data, and we had filtered out the null, any row with a null in it. So our original data set has 10 variables. It had 474 records, 474 individual people, 1 record or 1 row per person. We filtered out any row that had a null in it, and that left us with 466 records. And then to that resulting data set, we did another filter. We filtered out, you can see here was our custom filter. This was our expression. We were looking for those people who were a minority. Their education level was less than or equal to 12 years, and they were born between 1950 and 1960. And we went through this last time. 11 records answered true to that criteria. As you can see, there they are. And the other 455 records answered false to this expression. And that's where we left off last time. So what I want to do now is introduce the formula tool right here. What I want to do, though, I'll keep this in our workflow right here. I'll put this up here. But I don't want to work from this filter. That was just to show you how you could do a multi-expression filter. I just want to work with all of our data that isn't null. So go back to our original data set, but then we subtract the null values. Let's start with here. And let's use a formula tool to show you what we can do with the formula tool. So if you look here, here's our tool configuration for formula. We can do multiple expressions just by adding a plus here. We get more and more expressions we can do. We're actually going to do 4 expressions. So I will put 4 spaces there. Or you can do 1 expression and then run the workflow, get the output, and then attach another formula tool to that output and do 1 expression and do it formula by formula. Just like with the filter tool, you could keep doing multi-filters, or you can just do 1 formula tool and have multi-expressions in it. And that's probably the way you want to go, because it's more efficient and makes your workflow not as, what shall we say, I don't know, busy. Get too many tools in here, harder to follow. So let's see here. Let's look at our output here. We want to do actually 4 things. First thing is we want to job category. If it's coded 1, remember I told you in the previous video, that means that the person is working in a manual labor job. If it's coded 2, it's a hybrid between manual labor and office job. And if it's coded 3, it's an office job. So we want to actually code the variable the way so where it's easy to understand. Instead of 1, 2, 3, we want to make it manual, hybrid, and office. That's the first thing we want to do. So let's go to our filter, and we want to write an if-then statement. So here's the expression: if, and then a condition. If that's true, then do this. Else, if that's not true, do this, and then end if. This is the syntax for the if-then statement. If you have multiple conditions, then you can, this would be the syntax. And we actually are going to have multiple conditions. So what we want to say is if job category, so I can find the variable here, or I could just type the bracket, since all variables are encoded in brackets. So if job category equals 1, then what? Well, first of all, I guess before we do this, we need to choose an output column. Where do we want the output of this expression to go? Do we want the output of this expression to replace the job category itself? That column? No, because job category is a numeric variable. If we go back here to our select tool, we'll see that job category is a numeric variable, double, it's numeric. And the output here is going to be a string, right? It's going to say the word manual, or it's going to say hybrid, or it's going to say office job. And that's not going to work. You can't replace a double variable with a string. So instead of selecting job category, and if we tried to do it, it wouldn't let you do it anyway. It would say an error. Like, for example, if we try to say, if job category equals 1, then put the word manual. And you have to do it in quotes. And it's going to give an error. So, well, I can finish it. Else if job category equals 2, then put the word hybrid. Else, I don't have to say else if job category equals 3, because there is only one other option. So else, put the word office, and then end our if statement. If I try to run this, it's not going to work, because job category is a double variable. And we're saying replace, anywhere you see a 1 in that column, replace it with this word, manual. That's a string, so you can't do that. So we need to create a new variable. So we'll add a column, and we'll just call it job category 2. And that new variable, we'll choose the data type for that variable to be variable with string. And we'll hit apply. Now we could run this, and you would see, we'll go ahead and run this. Let's run this. Look at our output from our formula filter here. So you see we still have our job category variable, but then appended to our data set, we have another column, our new variable we've created. If this column says 3, then put office in this column. If this column says 1, put manual. If this column says 2, put hybrid job. So you can see the formula filter is accomplishing what it's supposed to. Go back to our formula filter. Let's add, we want to do something else as well. Let's go back to our data. I want to create a new variable. That's the difference between their current salary and what they started with in terms of the salary. So, for example, in this person, this is what they're making now. This is what they made when they began the job. And I want to create a variable, we'll call it salary difference, which is the difference in these two. How would we do that? That variable would be titled salary difference, and it would have, for this row, it would say $30,000. It seems kind of easy to think about what you want to do, but to actually do it, it's a little bit harder, as is often the case when you're using software with data. So we'll go to our formula tool, and we'll add formula. We'll select a new column. We'll call it, we'll call that column salary difference. Salary difference is going to be the difference between salary and beginning salary. You might think, wow, that was easy. Not so fast. Salary's data type is string. Beginning salary's data type is string. They're not numeric variables because they have that $ in there, and they have that comma in each figure. There's a $ and a comma. So a string minus a string, you can't do arithmetic operations on strings, only on numeric variables. See, it says invalid type in subtraction operator. You can't subtract a string from a string. Invalid data type. They got to be numeric. So we can fix that. There's a function that you're going to learn. And the first thing we want to do, we want to keep both salary and beginning salary. We can keep them strings, but we need to remove the $ and you see this $ and this comma? I want to remove both of those and then put this 0 and this 7 right beside each other. So it just says the number 57000, or you can call that a string as well. 57,000. Same thing here. So we want to get it in that format first. So let's go to our there's a function called replace character. And you see here, this is the syntax of the function. So we want to replace a character in the string variable salary. And what do we want to replace? We want to replace a $ and a comma. Those have to be in quotes. And put a comma. What do we want to replace the $ and the comma with? We want to replace it with just a blank, or nothing, essentially. Just remove the $ and the comma. So to do that, you just put quote, and then nothing, and then quote. And then close the parentheses. So this replace character function, it takes this variable, which is a string data type. It only will accept a string data type as an input. It takes this variable. In each row, it looks at the number in that variable's column, or at the expression in that variable's column. It finds the $ and the comma, and it replaces them with nothing. We could do the same thing with our beginning salary. And actually, you can see the output. Well, let's do it here. Replace character beginning salary. Replace the $ and a comma with nothing. And I believe that will we'll do it here. All right, this minus sign, it's still not doing, because all we've done, we haven't changed the variable's type. We're still not subtracting a number from a number. We're subtracting a string from a string. It's just this string now, instead of, for example, in that first row, instead of saying $57,000, it'll say 57,000. And this will say 27,000. But they're still both strings. So to convert a string to a number data type, you can do it with a function. To number is the function. We want to convert this thing to a number. And we want to convert this thing to a number. Now it gives us a preview of what it'll look like. We took our string, $57,000, took out the $ and the comma. That left us with 57,000, but that was a string. We converted it to a number, so we have 57,000 as a number, minus 27,000 as a number, equals 30,000 as a number. Our variable salary difference, we still want it to be a data type string. Why? Because we don't just want to output this. We want to output the $sign right back here, and then the comma. We want $30,000, which is a string. This is a number now. So how do we take this number and convert it back to a string with a $sign in front of it and a comma, you know, at the thousandth position? To do that, you put, so we want to append or insert a $sign in front of the 3. So we're going to put quotes, $sign. No, not full quotes, just part quotes. Just one quote. $sign, quote, plus. Oh, there's one thing we have to do. We have to convert this 30,000 to a string. So to do that, use the toString function. toString. And that would put a $sign in front of the 30,000, but we want that comma there. The toString function has a syntax, and you can look this up. I'll show you how to do this in Alteryx on the website, but in the documentation, there's a syntax. You see how that comma is now there? And so we'll go look up the you need to know how to look up functions. This is exactly what we want. Now it is a string, and we're not going to get a an error when we do that, when we run this. So if you go on Alteryx's documentation and you go look at the functions, and it has a list of all the functions, and you find the function toString. Here's toString. It converts a numeric parameter, x, numeric data type variable, to a string using numDes decimal places. So I put 0 decimal places. Here's my x. This is my x. All this. It was 30,000. I want to convert that to a string. 0 decimal places. That's the second argument of the function. First argument is the number. Second argument is the number of decimal places. And the third argument is add thousands separator. And all you have to do is put a number 1 there. And then there is another argument as well if you want to. Decimal separator. By default, the period is used as the decimal separator. But there is no decimal in these numbers, so we don't have to add that other argument. There's a thousandth separator. If I leave that off, just put a 0 there. There's no thousandth separator. Put a 1, there's a thousandth separator. If I want to add decimals, then put a 1 there, it adds 1 decimal place. Put a 2, it adds 2. Put a 3, it adds 3, and so forth. 0 decimals, add a thousandth separator. This is what you do for functions that you don't understand. You're going to need, this is a reference point online that you're going to have to use a lot. There's lots of functions in Alteryx. I'm not going to go through every function. And the ones I do go through, I'm going to go through somewhat quickly. And it's up to you to go and look at the documentation and see exactly what the function is and what it does. There are examples as well. You see here the examples. So this is good. All right, that'll create another variable, another column tacked onto the end of our data set called salary difference. It'll be the difference between the column salary and the column beginning salary. Have we made an error here? I don't think so. So let's run. Here's our output. Look at our output. We should see there's our job category 2 variable we created. There's our salary difference variable. And we can check. 57,000 minus 27,000 equals 30,000. You can verify that the salary difference variable is the difference between those two variables. Right? All right, in our formula tool, we want to do 2 more things. Like I said at the beginning, we want to do 4 things. Here's our first thing, there's our second thing. All right, what do we want to do next to this data? Time on job and previous experience are both in months. So this person has spent 98 months at their current job. Before they got this job, they had 144 months of experience in a job related to this. So these 2 variables are in months, but education is in years. We want to be consistent. So I want to convert time on job and previous experience to years. Time on job and previous experience are, if I recall, if we go back to our last select tool, time on job and previous experience are both, variable with strings. They're strings, right? So we have to remember that when we're writing our formula here. Let's go to our formula. Let's add. I already added it, but when you go away from it, it undoes what you did. Let's add a column. We'll call it time on job 2. You would think, okay, we can just change the time on job column itself. We don't have to add another column. We can just make this column what it was before divided by 12. So this would now say 98 divided by 12, which is, because it's 12 months in 1 year, that converts it to a year. 8.1666667 years is, I just recall that from doing this before. But the thing is, you can't take this and divide it by 12 because this is a string and you can't do arithmetic operations on strings. So it makes sense to create a new variable. We'll call it time on job 2. That is a numeric variable. And that does exactly what I just said. So let's do that. Add a column, we'll call it. Same thing for previous experience. We're going to do the exact same thing. So we're going to call it time on job 2. It's going to be equal to time on job. Now I want to divide by 12. But then this is going to give an error. Formula, try to apply a numeric operator to a string value. So it's trying to do arithmetic operations on something that's not a numeric data type. This is a string data type. So as you can imagine, we're going to first convert this thing to a number, time on job. Then we're going to divide by 12. And that'll give this as an output for the first row. 98 months is 8.1666666, whatever, 7 years. But I want to round this to the nearest 2 decimal places. I want it to show 8.17 years. So there's a function called round. So round takes as an input a number. Here's the number. This is this right here. And put a comma. And then what do we want to round it to? We want to round it to 2 decimal places. So to do that, you put 0.01. And it rounds it to 8.17. If you want to round to the nearest year, we would just put 1. It would round it to 8 years. Rounds to the nearest year. Anything 8.5 or higher would be rounded to 9 years. Less than 8.5, but bigger than or equal to 8 would be 8 years. We could round it to 3 decimal places if we want to. We could do that. But I want to round it to 2 decimal places. So the function is round the number that you want to round, comma, and then what do you want to round it to? How many decimal places? All right. And then we want the output, this time on job 2 variable, to be not a string data type, but a double data type. Numeric data type. Remember I said in the previous video, for a numeric data type, just make it a double. That's your safe bet. Don't make it a integer. Don't choose these. I mean, those are also numeric, but you get into trouble with those if you don't have enough of characters. So just choose double. All right, we want to do the same thing to previous experience. Create previous experience 2. And basically we can just copy and paste this down here. And we replace this variable with the previous experience variable. All right. And change this to double. We want the new variable to be a double. And hit apply and hit run. That is all I wanted to do with this formula tool. That's enough to highlight what the formula tool can do. So now we have our 4 things we did with the formula tool. We created a new variable job category 2 that replaced 1, 2, or 3 with manual, hybrid, or office job. We created a salary difference variable, which was the difference between the salary variable and the beginning salary variable. We created time on job 2, which is the time on job variable but converted to years instead of months, rounded to 2 decimal places. Same thing for the previous experience 2. Now it makes sense to use a select tool to clean up our data a little bit. We don't really need job category anymore. We don't need time on job anymore. We don't need previous experience. So we're going to take our job category variable that we created, and I probably should make this bigger so you can see. We're going to take our job category variable we created and we're going to rename it to job category. You say, but that other variable it's already named job category. Yes, but we've unchecked it. We're not going to include it in our output. We're going to take this new variable and that's going to be our new job category variable. Time on job 2, we're going to rename that to time on job. And it makes sense, since it's in years, to let the reader know that. In years, previous experience 2 is going to be, we'll rename that to previous experience. In years. And then, what else? Education. Education, we can just rename that education in years to let people know that that's in years. And then we could run this, but to just clean things up and make it look a little pretty, we don't have to do this. Since we have unchecked these things, they won't show up in the output. But we can move this down all the way to the bottom. We're not using this variable. We're not using this variable or this variable anymore. And then our salary difference variable, we should probably put that right beside our, so we'll have our salary column, then our beginning salary, and then the difference between those 2 columns. There we go. Oh, actually, minority was the last variable. We should move up job category, time on job. Actually, job category was up here, wasn't it? It was up by right after birth date. And then time on job and previous experience were right after the salary stuff. Now let's run this. Here's our nice data set here. Let's have a look at the output. You see our job category. Now it says not 1, 2, or 3, but actually tells what category of job it is. Here's our education in years. We rename that variable. Here's our salary. Here's our beginning salary. Here's our difference, salary difference. Here's our time on job in years, rounded to 2 decimal places. Previous experience in years, rounded to 2 decimal places. You see how powerful the formula tool is. And then, of course, the select tool rearranges the columns in the way that we want them and renames them and stuff like that. Change data types as well. All right, let's use 2 other tools I want to show you in this video. They will take much less time than the formula tool because they're very simple. Let's do a sample tool. Show you what sample does. Let's attach it here to our recent output. If you look over here, here's the tool configuration, and basically it just takes a sample of the observations that are in this data set. So here's our data set. And if we want to take the first 100 rows of data as our sample, then we would highlight this. That's already highlighted by default, and 100 is put there by default. If we want the first 200 rows, we could replace this with 200. If we want the last 200 rows, we would click this, and so forth. You see the options. So let's just take the first 200 rows and just see what the output would look like. We don't have to group by column. You don't do anything down here. Look at the output. It should say that there are 200 records. There they are. It's the first 200 rows. So that's the sample tool. There's another way to take the first certain number of, the sample tool is just essentially getting a subset of your data. And we talked about the filter tool also takes subsets of your data. So you could also do the same thing using a filter tool. It's a two-step process to do it, though. It's not as quick as a sample tool. But just know that in Alteryx, there are multiple ways to do a given thing. As long as you know how to do it at least one way. You don't have to know all the different ways. Now the random sample tool. We'll show you this and then we'll be done with the video. If we took a random sample from our data here. So here's our data. The random sample tool takes a random sample. We can either take a random sample of a certain percentage of the data, or we can take a random sample of a certain number of records, number of rows. This is the one you would use most often. Suppose we want to take 30 of these people and randomly 30 rows and sample them. Sample of size 30. What would the output look like? It just randomly picks 30 rows from our data set. These are the rows it picked. And the output from the random sample tool is put in order of the first column. So it's sorted by the order of the first column in ascending order, whatever. So ID number, and it sorts them by that column. So this person was chosen randomly. This person was chosen. There were 30. You can see there's 30 records displayed. If we ran it again, likely the same people wouldn't be chosen. Like person 8 probably wouldn't be chosen again if we randomly sample 30 observations from 466 observations. Let's try it. Run our workflow. What does this 30 row sample look like? See, person 8's not there, and it's person 5 was chosen, person 32, and so forth. We could take a bigger random sample. We could just change our end sample size here. If we try to pick a bigger size than our data is, our population is 466. So if we try to randomly sample 500 from 466, let's see if it spits an error. It did not spit an error. Why did it not? Oh, if you make it bigger than the number, it just reports the population as your sample, evidently. It should give you an error, but it doesn't. So anyway, that's the random sample tool and how to use it. All right, that concludes this video.